Hey, Salvador Briggman here. Welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified YouTube channel. And today we're talking about how do you raise $100,000 on Kickstarter. It's a ginormous amount, and we're breaking down what actually goes into that raise here today on today's YouTube video. Okay, so when it comes to this, I'm very much a fan of being practical, right? There are a lot of things that I think we consider to be magic, right? When you see something that looks so incredibly beautiful, like a really well-made pitch video, or you look at the campaign page and the design and the look and the feel of that, it almost feels like magic. When you have a product that comes out that has next generation functionality, you feel like it's magic, honestly. Like when the first iPhone came out, you thought this was like magic. At least I did, right? And what you kind of realize though is that there are actually step-by-step processes that go into making that magical thing a reality. And obviously over time, someone copies the iPhone, you got Samsung, they have all these other carriers, right? So other people figure it out. But one person kind of figured it out and they were able to go and they were able to produce this product into the world. Same thing happens with Kickstarter, right? Because you see some of these 6-figure campaigns or 7-figure campaigns and you're like, I know it's possible, but how do you do it, right? And that's really what I'm trying to answer on today's YouTube video. And also, if you listen to my podcast, the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast, which you can find on iTunes, just search my name, or you can search, if you want to, some of my clips on Instagram, Salvador Briggman, and it will come up with a bite-sized version of the podcast, or on this YouTube channel. You'll see some of these successful campaigners who are doing just that, and they tell you from the horse's mouth what they did in order to raise money successfully. So today I'm gonna give you sort of my thought and my perspective on how to raise 6 figures, $100,000 on Kickstarter. Let's get right into it. Okay, so the first thing that we have to break down when it comes to a $100,000 or a 6-figure raise is what is that comprised of, right? Because you could have a product that's selling for $20, you could have a product that's selling for $100, you see products on Kickstarter that are selling for $300 and up, right? And when you think of sales or revenue, if you have, let's just say, 100 customers that are buying at the $20 price point, you're gonna end up raising $2,000 or thereabouts in revenue. So let's do it the other one. So let's just say like you have a $200 product and you have 100 customers at that price point, you would end up raising $20,000 in fundraising revenue in pre-orders with your Kickstarter campaign. Now, why am I illustrating that simple example? Because the price point of your product really determines the amount of money that you can raise on Kickstarter. That's a really big component of it. Now, it's not the only thing, but it's one variable and one factor that I want to point out is the price of your product. Because you shouldn't, if you're selling a product for, let's just say 50 bucks, you should not be comparing yourself to a campaign where the product's selling for $400, right? Or if you're selling your product for 100 bucks, you probably shouldn't be comparing yourself to a campaign where the price point of the product is closer to $20, right? You should really compare yourself to other and emulate other Kickstarter campaigns or Indiegogo campaigns that have a similar price point to your product. That's number one. Number two, let's just say that you do have a product that's a bit more of a lower price point. It's a $40 product, right? But when you look at some of these other Kickstarter campaigns, you see that they're actually packaging their reward tiers. So it's not just people are buying at the $40 level, it's closer to they're buying at the $70 level because they're getting the actual product, maybe some of these different accessories, or more people are getting 2 of the product rather than just 1. You can go and you can look at some of the other popular and successful campaigns out there. You can see how they package their reward tiers and how that increases the overall order value. This is kind of what I call when you go into the grocery store or you go into Walmart or you go into Walgreens or one of these pharmacies, right? You think you're gonna buy a pack of gum and you end up walking out having bought like $50 worth of products that you didn't really intend to, right? You obviously get those really long receipts that they always have for some reason in CVS. So you go in thinking you're gonna maybe make a $5 purchase and you end up walking out and making a $50 purchase, right? The same thing happens with Kickstarter, which is people come in thinking, maybe I just want the $20 one, but then they're like, actually the most value that I can get is with more of a $50 reward package, so they end up pledging at the $50 tier. So it's not just only the price of your product, which determines the ease of hitting that number of 100K, it's also the way in which you package your rewards, because that's gonna increase the overall order value for your particular crowdfunding campaign. So we've made two assumptions, right? Let's talk about a third. Now, the third is how many backers do we need to be able to hit that number? So let's just go with the example that we're going to have a $200 package, which is going to be the average order value. Now, we could always decrease this. You can play around with the math. You can have this be 100. I really recommend, if you can, making an Excel spreadsheet, or you can do a one-on-one coaching call with me, and I can actually walk you through some of this math as well as some of the other templates that I use when trying to figure out some of these questions, right? Because there's obviously shipping also involved and like all this other kind of stuff when it comes to Kickstarter and e-commerce in general. So let's just go roll with the $200 price point. If we were to try and generate $100,000 worth of fundraising revenue on Kickstarter, how many customers would we need? Pause this video, do the math yourself, and then we'll come back and discuss. According to my math here, we would need 500 backers at the $200 level in order to raise $100,000 on Kickstarter. 500 customers, 500 backers over the span of, say, 45 days, 30 days, 60 days, doesn't really matter, right? But you would need 500 customers in order to hit the six-figure number. Now, I think that's so important because when we're just starting to learn about marketing online, we think we need like thousands of customers, we need millions of visitors, we need so much traction. And this was kind of my thinking when I was getting started in the industry back in 2012. I'm like, you need so much volume, you need lots and lots of people. But when you really do the math, you don't necessarily need thousands and thousands of people in order to raise $100,000 on Kickstarter, right? You need the right price point. You need the right number of people backing at that price point in order to do the math and to be able to hit that 100K number. Now, I have some other great videos out there when it comes to other things that you might not be thinking about, like failed credit cards and canceled pledges and all that kind of stuff. So number one, I recommend you pick up a copy if you do of the Kickstarter launch formula, where I detail a lot of this stuff. I have an Audible version. I'll link it up down below. Also got a paperback version and available on Amazon. Also, some great courses out there when it comes to Kickstarter and crowdfunding that I recommend taking, because it walks you through a lot of the stuff that you got to know. But basically, that being said, it is realistic. There are 500 people out there that are willing to buy a new product that comes out. There's a lot more that goes into it, but we're just kind of staying very high level here. Okay, so the next question is, where are those people going to discover this particular campaign or this particular project, right? So if you've been watching these videos at all, if you've been part of my loyal community, you've been leaving comments, you've been upvoting, you've been subscribed, right? If you're part of the community, you will know that I talk a lot about the pre-launch and how important the pre-launch is for developing necessary traction in order to get some other players involved, in order to get the attention of Kickstarter's marketplace itself, in order to get the attention of going viral in terms of social media, getting media mentions, like all that kind of stuff, right? So this is something that is really important and can help you begin to get and make a dent in that number. Now, when it comes to a pre-launch, there are a lot of different mindsets, a lot of different perspectives on this. A lot of people say that you should set your lowest goal as possible. I'm one of those people. I don't think you should make this process very difficult for yourself. I think you should set an achievable goal, one that's realistic, but one that is also achievable, right? And that 100K should more so be your internal goal, but your external goal might be a little bit less than that. Other people have very different perspectives, right? And it obviously depends as well, depending on the category that you're launching in. Tech products are very different than running a theater campaign versus a film campaign versus a board game. There are a lot of different categories, right, of different products. And Indiegogo is different from Kickstarter as well. So there are a lot of different caveats here, but I'm trying to make a video that kind of encompasses a lot of these different things, right? So when it comes to this, let's just say that you're trying to bring 50%, or we can get even more conservative, 30% of that number if we want to. If we were to try and bring, we'll just say go with 50%, kind of like that number. Let's just say we're trying to bring 50% of the funding with a pre-launch campaign that we're running for the Kickstarter. How many backers would we need? Well, we already did the math. We need 500, right, to get to the 100K revenue target, 500 backers at the $200 pledge level. If we are going to get to 50K, We then have to get 250 customers or early adopters or backers within ideally the first week that we go live. The sooner we get them, the better. If it could be within the first 3 days, that would be ideal, obviously, or even the first day, right? But we're just kind of keeping this simple. So we need 250 people to buy this product in order to get the engine going, to rev the engine, to kindle the fire that's going to really start this big blaze, this big bonfire, right? We need the kindling, and that's really where the pre-launch comes in. So when it comes to the Kickstarter, how are we going to get those initial 250 people? Past the 250 people, it could come from Facebook ads, it could come from Kickstarter itself, it could come from viral social media, it could come from media mention, it could come from newsletters, etc. So many different ways, right? Go watch one of the other videos I got out there on marketing and promoting your Kickstarter campaign. But when it comes to the pre-launch, these people typically are going to come from running a ad-based campaign or running an organic marketing campaign, driving people to a landing page, gathering email addresses, getting them to join your community, maybe even doing a Facebook bot if you want to. I've got a great podcast out there on Facebook bots. There are a lot of different ways in which you can kind of get the contact information of the people you can remarket to them when you go live. The question is, let's just say we're going to go with the email example, right? So we're going to talk about social media followers and email. What is the number that we need in order to convert into 250 customers? I'm going to answer that in just a second.
This YouTube video is sponsored by The Gadget Flow. The Gadget Flow reaches over 28 million people, and they've been around since 2012. They're Indiegogo and Kickstarter experts. They featured over 5,000 crowdfunding campaigns. If you have a tech or design campaign, it is a great platform to generate awareness and get backers. Check them out at thegadgetflow.com/submit and list your project today.
I'm going to be very generous. When it comes to like a pre-launch campaign, the audience can convert at many different numbers. On the low side, I've seen people convert just like 1 to 2% of their audience. I've been on some campaigns that I've coached on where they weren't gathered super well, the emails and those kinds of things. I've seen them convert at 5%. I've seen them convert at 10%. I've seen projects where the pre-launch audience converts at 15%, right? So it's very different. And the kind of differences there are really in product market fit. It's in the way in which the contact information was gathered for those people that are a member of your audience. If it's just like a Facebook fan page, or if it's an email list, or like if it's a Facebook bot they're subscribed to, like what is it, right? So there's a lot of variability. So I'm just gonna throw out a number. Let's just say that the pre-launch audience converts at 7%, right? So if you have an audience, we'll just say that 7% of them end up becoming backers or buyers within the first week or within the first couple of days of you going live. 7%. Let's do the math now and let's figure out how big of an audience do we need given these other variables and these things in order to hit our ideal target, which is to get to 50%. So the way we do this, and I'll be honest, math was not my strongest subject when I was growing up in school. Even though I loved computer programming, I was a nerd. I did like chess club. I was a Dungeons and Dragons nerd, like all that stuff. But at the end of the day, math was not my strongest subject. I'm much more of a writer, a communicator, teacher, speaker, etc. And marketing, right? So what we do is we take 250 and we divide that by 0.07, and that equals 3,500 roughly people that we would need. And we can just confirm that by saying 3,500 times 0.07 equals 250. So we just say we need 3,500 people in our audience, assuming these other things, if they're going to convert at 7%, in order to get us to thereabouts that number, right? Now there are a lot of assumptions behind this. Now there could be many differences as well, depending on product category. And I'm only saying that because I don't want you to have the wrong assumption. I don't want you to think this is like a magic pill, right? I'm creating different financial models. I'm creating different use cases, different ways of thinking about this, right? So take it with a grain of salt, and do your own homework. But basically, if we're converting at 7% and we have 3,500 of a robust core community and 7% of that community ends up converting into buyers, that would end up giving us 250 buyers. And if we're converting at the $200 level, That would thereabouts get us to around $50,000, assuming that they do convert and that all those numbers that I just quoted you are sound. While this is not an exact science, you should, by at this point in the video, be getting a bit of a clearer understanding of how this can work, right? And how you can actually, with using numbers, using science, using predictions, you can kind of get a bit of a firmer grasp on how you could actually end up raising $100,000. And the other thing I kind of want to talk about now is like, what are some of the variables that might keep you from reaching that? What are some of the things you might not even expect that might you cause you to raise more? And some of the stuff that just not really talked about very much when it comes to e-commerce, when it comes to crowdfunding, all that kind of stuff. So basically, now that you have a little bit of a formula, which I do think you should think about a little bit more, but now that you have a little bit, let's dive a little bit deeper into some of the assumptions behind this. Okay. So the first assumption is that this percentage of the community is going to convert into backers, right? Some of those assumptions are, number one, they understand the problem. They know and are readily identified with the product. They think it solves the problem. They like it. They're interested. So they have a high interest level. Number two, price, right? They are pre-qualified, or you know that they are going to convert on that particular price point. This is probably the most difficult component, I would say, of crowdfunding, and one of the things that I can talk about in another video more extensively is figuring out the pricing of your product in a way that resonates well with backers and consumers, but that also gives you enough profit so you can actually grow a sustainable business out of this and you have money to put back in your ads and all that kind of stuff, right? So price is another thing that could keep people on the fence. What's a third thing? A third thing is that they really like it. They have the money to buy it. They like the price point, but they're not fully sold that this will work for their individual case or their individual situation. In other words, they're being held back because they like the idea of the promises and the benefits, right? But for some reason, logically, they don't understand the functionality. They don't think it's the right size. They don't think the technical specs are up to par. They kind of doubt. There's a part of them that's like, this is really cool, but something's holding them back. And usually that's the logical side of the brain. And when that comes into play, it means you didn't answer enough questions in the pre-launch, meaning you probably could have sent more emails, or there could have been more video creation that's been made, or the actual pitch video could have more to it, right? There are more questions in someone's mind that's holding them back from buying. Kind of like this. If you ask me, Sal, you know, if you asked me about a new camera that came out for YouTube, and this is like 4K, really affordable price point, but I don't know anything about the technical specs. I don't know what the lens is like. I don't know how much it weighs. What is the brand behind it? These kinds of things. What is the resolution? What is the frame rate? Like, what are all these things? What are the attachments maybe that can have, right? So I've bought cameras before that don't have an external mic attachment, which has been really annoying. So if there's some kind of like technical question that I have, that is gonna hold me back likely from buying a high priced product. Now, if you have a lower priced product, something that's like 20 bucks or 50 bucks, it might not as much. You know, it's really difficult to say. It really depends on the community. But that's the first thing, is that conversion rate is gonna depend on how well you warm up those leads, get them excited, answer those questions, so that when they come right on the campaign page, they are primed to buy. Like, they're excited, they're ready to do it, they know the price, they're going forward, right? They're okay, they're pre-qualified in all these ways. That to me is the thing when it comes to conversions. The second thing when it comes to Kickstarter, and this is really frustrating, I'll be honest with you, just because it's something that not a lot of people are aware of, right? Particularly a lot of my coaching students have this question, which is, how is Kickstarter similar to e-commerce, right? Because there is a pre-order function, like people will get the product at a certain point in time. However, a lot of people have never backed a Kickstarter campaign before, which means you might have to educate on that a little bit. If you have a huge community, let's just say of like 3,500 people, and most of these people have never backed a Kickstarter before, it's gonna be a process because they don't understand it. You need to teach them, you need to educate them a bit. Send them one of my videos if you want to. Obviously that's great for me, right? But you need to educate them just a tiny bit of how do you make a pledge, what does that mean, when is the fundraising duration until, What is the percentage off that they're getting? Like all these kinds of little micro questions, right? You have to kind of hold their hand a little bit if they're not very familiar with Kickstarter and with crowdfunding. If they are, then it's not as difficult because they're already familiar with it. You don't have to teach about it, right? So it's gonna be naturally a much more seamless transition from the pre-launch to the actual live crowdfunding campaign. Now, when I first set out to make this video, I was gonna make like a shorter video, but it's obviously getting a bit longer. So I kind of want to just end with like maybe one or two more things that I think you should be aware of when it comes to making a six-figure campaign, right? And the first thing is that when Kickstarter was first getting started, I remember the day when like the potato salad campaign went online, and this guy literally just raised money online to make potato salad and ended up giving money to charity, right? At least that's what I read. So this guy raised $50,000 in order to make potato salad, and it was like the stupidest thing ever, but it was kind of funny, right? And people were just sharing it because they thought it was a laugh, and they would give like $1 or $2. He ended up raising $50,000 to do this and to make potato salad. He did this whole charity thing, right? So those were days that were existing. Like that was the heyday, in my opinion, of like the wild west of crowdfunding when I was just getting started in the industry back in 2012. And since then, it's definitely progressed and become much more of a professional track. So if you're thinking of going into a project and raising $100,000 without a pre-launch and without knowing what you're doing in terms of the marketing, with the Facebook ads, with the high quality pitch video, the graphics, if you don't have any of that, it's gonna be very difficult for you to compete because existing backers are expecting such a high caliber now, right, of Kickstarter campaigns, and those that haven't backed one before, they're still expecting normal marketing, right? So you really can't get away with the old school, just throw up a project, throw up a video, do a little bit of social media promotion, right, and be able to raise a significant amount of money. That's unfortunately just not the case anymore. So you do need to have a budget. And this would be my number one message, is that in order to get to the bigger numbers with a Kickstarter campaign, you need to put aside a marketing budget. And the more that you do this, number one, it's going to be a lot better because then you can sort of test the ROI, right, of that budget. If you don't have a budget, then it's like, I don't know what the ROI is, and I don't know if I should put in more money or not. There's no testing phase. There's nothing, nothing to draw your attention to there as a business owner. If you have a budget, you can be like, okay, we spent this amount on the budget. This is what the ROI has been. Does it invest more capital? Should we put in more, right? There's a lot more of a better financial decision, I think, there when you have budgets. It's why big companies obviously have budgets, right? So the first is to create a budget for your campaign. And when it comes to what that budget should be, usually it's about 10%. Other people might quote you 15% of the amount of money that you want to raise on Kickstarter as going towards the marketing, right, for the project. Some people might say you only need a 5% budget. I think that's a little bit conservative. I think you need closer to a 10% budget. If someone says 15, I still think that's honestly reasonable, but it depends on the category and on the overall viral uptick behind your project, the organic appeal, if you will. If you have a really high organic appeal, you don't need as much of a big budget in order to get the word out there, because people are already sharing your Facebook ad with their friends. They're already sharing your messages on different social media platforms with their friends, right? They're already interested in buying, and they're clamoring to get this thing that you've created. So it's not as much of a thing if you have a really good product and like a really big, good product market fit. But there's still a testing phase that goes into even determining whether or not you have product market fit. And there's a whole thing behind pricing that I wasn't just able to cover in this video to try to have this be a reasonable length. So if you still have questions, number one, you can leave a comment down below. I'll do my best to get to you. Number two, if you're interested, go and check out the Kickstarter launch formula. You can book a one-on-one coaching call with me, and those are some great places. You can also check me out on Instagram. I'm posting sort of bite-sized video clips there under Salvador Briggman. You can search me, Crowdfunding Salvador Briggman, on Instagram. Listening to the podcast is probably one of the best places to really get industry knowledge when it comes to crowdfunding. But thank you so much for tuning into this video. I really promised a lot with this video. I hope that at least brought a little bit of a scientific perspective, I think, or at least a little bit more well thought out perspective to how to raise six figures on Kickstarter, made it a little bit more practical and realistic for you, and hopefully you can wrap your head around this and how this can work for you and your project. My name is Sal, and I'll see you next time.